Hello and welcome to the online edition of the Shenandoah Youth Film Festival. My name is Alex Eggersdorfer and I'm one of the writers and also help with the selection committee with the film festivals of the Shenandoah Film Collaborative. Today we have a Q&A session for Wendigo with its creator, Max Hendrickson, who's with us today. Hi, Max.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience who's just seen your film?
Yeah, so my name is Max Hendrickson. I live in Dublin, Ireland, and I'm a 16-year-old filmmaker. I've been making films for, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years. And I sort of like animation as a medium, specifically sort of computer, like 3D computer generated animation.
Right. That was going to be my first question. When did you start first animating or making films in general? Because this film, Wendigo, is not only technically really well accomplished, but it's also narratively, structurally, tonally, really refined, especially for a filmmaker. How old were you when you made it?
I started making when I was 14.
Okay,
and
yeah. That's astonishing. But I was really curious about those very first stages when you first were interested, if it was a filmmaking interest, if it was an animating interest specifically, and how you came about really getting into it.
Well, I suppose my grandfather sent me a little camcorder for my birthday when I was like 6 or something. So I think that's probably what sparked my interest in sort of creating films and stuff. But I only really started to sort of make proper structured films like when I was around 10 or 11. And Wendigo was sort of my first film that like I had a, sort of full script for, and was sort of a longer film. It's like 15 minutes or something. So
Yeah, I was going to ask, it must have taken forever to make it. How long was the process of production for you?
it took nearly a year, like a year and a half, I think, from sort of initial concept to the final version.
Right, and how much time a day would you have to dedicate towards it?
Not that much. I'd say probably like an hour or so.
Fantastic.
Maybe.
Yeah, I was going to ask also, the film very much has a very tense, horrific vibe. It's very much like I would consider it a horror film. Would you?
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
say so.
Where did this idea first come from? Was there a specific inspiration that you had, or?
Well, I don't know. I read The Shining and then saw the film, so I think a lot of inspiration. That was like halfway through production. I watched the film, so then a lot of sort of the visual side of things came from that. Um, I don't know. I've always sort of liked horror as a genre, and sort of pulp horror films and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I think that was probably a big inspiration for me.
Fantastic, yeah. So you are credited as the sole creator. Did you turn to a lot of people for advice here, or was it really you in your editing suite or your animation suite just constantly working on yourself, or did you turn to people for advice throughout the process?
Towards the end of the film, because it ended up being longer, like the deadline for most, or not the deadline, like the limit for most festivals is 15 minutes long. So I wanted that to be sort of the limit. And I think all the animation I produced for it was probably like 18 to 20 minutes of worth of stuff. So I got a lot of advice from like my parents and stuff about sort of the weakest parts and then cut them out, and
Well,
stuff
it's
like that.
interesting that you mentioned the animation because it's a really interesting mix of animation, and I'm not very technically savvy when it comes to animating styles, but it does seem like there are maybe mixed animation styles in here, maybe possibly some altered live action. Could you talk a little bit about the technicalities of the animation styles?
Yeah, so I I think a hard thing to do is like 3D characters, at least for me. So like sort of, the sort of stuff you see in Pixar, just animating like realistic looking humans is really hard. So I wanted to do sort of like a mix of traditional animation and sort of these semi-realistic like backgrounds. So I think the longest process was doing the character animation. So I'd start out like sketching them out, and then I'd, do like ink the characters with a pen, and then I'd scan them in, and then I'd digitally color them, and I'd cut them out, and then I could place them in the sort of 3D scene and then animate them walking or whatever. So that is pretty time consuming, but I sort of like the result. There's a lot of experimentation and stuff.
Yeah, it always seems every image that we see is always very layered, especially when it comes to just the foreground of whatever characters in the scene in the background, or the fire that engulfs the image, and then we see the house in the background. It's always a very dense, complex, really, really well crafted image, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess my next point was going to be about kind of the tone that you were able to accomplish here, because a lot of the tension we feel as a viewing audience comes also from the sound effects, the line delivery, the music that's kind of put around the images that are already quite distressing on their own. Talk to me about that selection process, finding the right tone, finding the right sounds and music. Yeah.
Well, I think the voice acting, like the voice performances, really helped, because I feel like the conversations seem a little bit weird because they were both recorded not talking to each other, just like separately and at separate times, and then I'd sort of slot them in together. So I think that sort of, I don't know, that sort of establishes a bit of a weird atmosphere, like the and then yeah, just sort of, I think like the woods is sort of a creepy enough environment anyways, so I think it was easy to sort of play into some of that stuff.
Right. Talk to me a little bit about your voice actors. Are they people that you knew? I know there were some people with a similar last name, possibly in the credits, and how it was working with them to get those line deliveries correctly, and whether they had acted before at all.
Well, so yeah, I got my grandparents to do some lines. Like my grandfather was the sort of old innkeeper, and then a friend of mine who lives in LA did the main character's voice. And yeah, they both had done voice acting before, and yeah, I was really pleased with the performances, and they really did a lot to sort of bring the movie to what it is today. So
I agree. It's really fantastic. I guess my next question was going to be kind of whether you wanted to stay in animation, whether you're going to go to filmmaking in general, live action, and kind of what the next steps are here.
yeah, well, I think one of the reasons I switched over to animation from sort of live action is because there's a lot more sort of scope with what you can do, because there's not sort of the limitations of like budget and stuff like that. And I think it's sort of a bit more versatile as like a storytelling medium for low budget sort of productions. And also it can often have much sort of prettier visuals than, like low budget, like live action, because I think you have more control over sort of how things look and the colors and stuff like that. And you can use, pretty color palettes and stuff. But yeah, I definitely intend to work on some more live action stuff in the future.
Are you already doing your next animated project, or is that still a little further off in the distance?
At the moment I'm working on, I have sort of a new project that's been put on hold, but at the moment I'm working on doing animation for another filmmaker's short film, which
That's
is
really
pretty
fantastic.
exciting.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, we're very excited to see the next project that you do, and are hopefully going to be able to screen it at our film festival at the next edition. Thank you so much, everyone who joined into our Q&A here with Max. Thank you, Max, for taking the time.
Thank you
Um,
so much for having me.
of course. Yeah. Have a good day.
Thanks.